And we're back. ADJU 201, Exam 2, Study Guide Review video for Chapter 5. Let me share my screen and we will get right to the study guide that hopefully you have downloaded. All right, here we go. The Supreme Court has held that indigents. Indigent means that they don't have much money. That is not indignant, meaning they're offended. It means they're poor. Actually, I have a funny story about that, about an officer who got those two words mixed up. I'll tell you that some other time. Supreme Court has held that indigents accused of felonies have the right to be represented by counsel at public expense. In other words, a public defender is going to cover their lawyering for free. Now, in California, you're going to get a public defender for a felony or a misdemeanor, but not an infraction. So it varies states, but Supreme Court says all felonies, you get a public defender. And after that, it varies state by state. Question 12, do you have the right to represent yourself in court? And the answer is yes, absolutely, you have the right. Now, the judge is going to look dimly on it and is going to recommend that you don't do it. In fact, there's a saying that something about a lawyer who represents himself as a fool for a client, I think is what it goes. The person who represents himself as a fool for a client. In other words, you're foolish to represent yourself. It rarely goes well. And the reason is because you're emotionally tied to the event. You're tied to what's going on. You're in survival state. If you've gone over to Tomorrow's Police Officer, especially on the Facebook Lives or the YouTube channel, I talk about this a lot. Your brain's only in one of two states: executive state or survival state. That's it. And you can be crossing between the two, but it's in one of those two states. So if you're like, you got a lot of pressure on you, you're in survival state. When you're in survival state, you are not thinking clearly, you're not being creative, you're not being productive. That requires you to be in executive state. When you're in executive state, that's a good thing. When you're in survival state, you're just getting along. So that's why it's not a good idea to represent yourself, but it's allowed. The 8th Amendment prohibits excessive bail. So you got to pay bail to get out of court. And that's very quickly going along. That was one of our discussion questions, yeah? About no bail, people being released on an OR or own recognizance and their promise to appear. 14, do the same rules of evidence apply to criminal trials as grand jury investigations? And the answer is no, absolutely not. Grand juries allow hearsay testimony. They're very lax. It's a low level thing. It's just like, should this person be going to court? Should we charge them with a crime or should we not? And that's why when you hear a case being taken to a grand jury and the grand jury saying, nope, they didn't do anything wrong, that's shocking, because almost you can't put on a defense. The defendant isn't even, it's just a prosecutor going in and telling one side of the story. So when a grand jury comes back and goes, that's a no-go, that's pretty bad. That's like me coming to you, giving you one side of the story. You have no other information and you going, yeah, no, I don't see it. It doesn't happen. We're not going to indict this person. A no contest plea. So what benefit does a no contest plea have? Why would somebody just not plead guilty? Why would they plead no contest? 2 reasons. Number 1, you feel better. You're not saying, I'm just pleading, I'm not going to argue it. That's what no contest is. There is no contest. There's no argument from me. I'm the defendant. You're the judge. Absolutely, I'm not going to fight this. So it can't be used against you in a civil trial. So somebody might plead guilty, or plead no contest in a criminal offense, but they know that there's going to be some sort of civil action coming out of it, and they don't want to plead guilty and then have in the civil trial them go, see, you pled guilty over in criminal court. So they plead no contest. So everything needs to be proved at a higher level in civil court because they can't rely on you saying you did it over in criminal court. An indictment is also known as a true bill. So in essence, what's happening is the grand jury is saying the charges that we were presented with, they're true. Now, the 18, it crosses over 2 pages. I'm sorry about that. The Speedy Trial Act of 1974 is the one that imposes the time limits. Think about this. If you're having pretrial and trial procedures and time limits, a Speedy Trial Act makes sense. And that's what the answer is. All right, number 19. Courts have held it to be a denial of due process if a prosecutor knows about exculpatory evidence and doesn't say anything, doesn't turn it over during discovery. So in other words, exculpatory, there's exculpatory and inculpatory. So exculpatory, I'll do that first because that's easiest. It shows that they're not culpable of the crime. In other words, if a prosecutor knew that they had an alibi, that there was a witness who said, hey, Johnny wasn't there, he was with me in another state, he couldn't have robbed the store. That's exculpatory. And if the prosecutor knew about this witness and didn't tell the defense, hey, by the way, this guy's saying your client didn't do it, that happens during discovery, then it would be a denial of due process. The prosecutor has to share with the defense any information that would help set the defendant free. Now, the defense is not required to share inculpatory evidence. Now, generally speaking, they're not required. It's not a violation of due process. Some states do require what's called mutual discovery. In other words, both sides have to share information. Not all states do that. So depending what state you're in, that may or may not be the case. So but the prosecutor, regardless of where you're at, if they have some information that shows that the client is innocent, the defendant is innocent, or less culpable. Maybe they weren't the mastermind. Maybe they weren't the person who went into a bank and held the gun, but they were the driver. It's kind of they were involved in it and they're all the same, but they had a different role in it. Prosecutor has to turn that evidence over to the defense. All right, that is it for chapter 5. I'll be back with chapter 6 soon. Bye for now.